welcome back to Consistently Candid. This time I'm here with Gabe Alfour, who is a co-founder of Conjecture and also an advisor with Control AI. Both organizations sort of working to reduce existential risks from AI, but I guess Conjecture more from the sort of technical research side and Control AI more from the policy and advocacy side. So do you want to just give a bit of background on you and how did you get worried about AI and what's the story behind Conjecture?
Yeah, sure. First, thanks for having me on your podcast. For how I got into AI, my trajectory is, I think, a bit different from most people in AI. I started caring mostly about catastrophic risks. When I was quite young, I think it was like 6 or something, I learned about climate change. And for me, the main thing around climate change is that it seemed quite unfair. Like it seemed very big. It seemed that anything could, contribute to climate change and so on and so forth. So I talked to a bunch of adults around me for the next few years to see what they think we should do and so on and so forth. It was like 20 years ago and people were less aware of climate change back then. Retrospectively, I was quite lucky because I was like 6 to 8 and yet you had adults take me and my concerns seriously, which is not a guarantee. But yeah, I will talk to them and a lot of them will take it seriously, even though they hadn't heard of it. But the main thing is that then they would do nothing. And for me, this was like the more important part and the thing that started it is that we can get big things happening. They can be big bad, we can see them coming, but people will not necessarily react. And so this was like formative experience in childhood, and then by middle school I had a more developed brain. And I learned about technological progress in general and how we handled it. I learned more, about nuclear weapons, about human cloning, bioethics, this type of stuff. A bunch of people of my classes, I read, some dystopia like 1984 and mass surveillance, A Brave New World, and between gene editing and like using drugs to control mind states and things like this. And basically the main vibe that I've gotten is if we get those technologies and they get deployed in real life, we're pretty screwed. And so for me, before AI, this was more the thing that I was thinking of, which was we get a lot of technological development, but it's not clear how well we're handling it and if we'll always manage. And so when I heard about AI, from my point of view, AI was mostly an accelerant on top of this. So I didn't have proper AI timelines at that point. I was more thinking about technological timelines. This is until I heard about the singularity and things like this. Until then, I did not consider that AI will be an accelerant to itself, which basically shortened my technological timelines to like the usual, timelines of people like before who have considered singularity that were like 2050, 2060 and things like this. So that's when I started caring about AI proper. And then the next phase is like conjecture, and this was mostly linked to GPT-3. So when I was teenager, young adult, I thought about singularity, I thought about things like this, but I was like, this is, a couple of scientific generations from now. It's not a short-term concern, it's more long-termism. We already have a bunch of other problems to solve right now. And then GPT-3 happened, I got access to the beta, and I tried it, and I was like, wow. But as teenagers on the internet that were like programmers, hackers type of thing, a bunch of us, drew the AGI diagram, like how I would build AGI. And when I played with GPT-3, there was a bunch of those that were like question mark for implementation that were basically solved. So it's like the high level approach. There were more things I tested, but basically that's what it amounts to. And since then, so since 2020, I've mostly considered AGI to be now more of an engineering project than a research project, and that's where I started getting like short timelines, and this is why I wanted to found Conjecture. So after GPT-3, I learned about transformers, I learned about like this modern LLM-based paradigm. I went on Eleuther AI, that was an online community, the biggest at the time, and I just looked for the admin and contacted the admin to see what was there, what where their mind was at and things like this. The admin back then was Connor. So I talked to him a bunch. It's like, we should build an organization to actually work on safety because this thing is like quite important. He was interested, but basically didn't know me. So this long story short, I harassed him for 18 months. At some point, he gave up, and we co-founded Conjecture like 3 years ago.
Nice. That's a good origin story. I like that. Sounds like you as a teenager like kind of figured out this like Fermi paradox thing, right? That if humanity keeps building like increasingly powerful technologies, at some point they will not have the wisdom to steward them anymore, and then that would be really bad. And then exactly. Singularity is like just one version of this, like one technology we should be worried about. But there are lots of others, but it just seems like AI is the one that's like coming down the pipe the quickest. So
yeah, exactly. It's been quite interesting to see the shift from AI as a long-term concern to AI as a very short-term concern, like the most short-term one.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, you now do have Sam Altman just writing on his blog, like, we think we know how to build AGI now. So
and so now our focus is on superintelligence.
Yeah, like it almost seemed, I had this moment last year, I was like, people aren't even really talking as much about AGI anymore. It's almost like everyone's now talking about ASI.
Yeah.
And is AGI no longer the relevant threshold that we're worried about anymore? Have we already got that? Or, it's confusing. Cool, I guess if we take it back to basics a little bit, if you were talking to a skeptical person and you were trying to convince them that AI is maybe going to be very dangerous, and they were just kind of like, well, I don't understand why we wouldn't just iteratively solve safety issues the same as we have done for most other technologies. Like, why is the problem of controlling super powerful AI like particularly hard?
Yeah. Just there are a lot of technologies where we haven't done iterative deployment to control them. My favorite example is like gene editing. Like, aside from medicine-based gene editing, we've done very little of it, very little human cloning and so on and so forth. The way we kept it safe was mostly by not doing it. So that's also one of the techniques that we use to keep things safe. When we don't think we can do it by iterative deployment, we just do the other one. But this doesn't answer why I think this is worth doing for AI specifically. I think it's a combination of three things basically. One is that AI is like big. I think that's the easiest one. A common reason for skepticism is just assuming that AI will not be big. When I say big, it's like a fuzzy, vague descriptor. I mean something that altered the course of humanity, the same way that nuclear energy or fossil energies or the internet altered the course of humanity. That's what I mean by big. If you assume that AI will not be big, then by default you will disagree with me on the risks and things like this. So I think that's the first one that is quite important, is that I assume AI will be big, and then there's the question of how big. I think it mostly depends on how much you extrapolate. The way I see it is that basically you have AI, current AI research that leads into AGI, which is, can do anything a human can do, let's say with a mouse and keyboard. From this you have automated AI R&D, which people give many different names: recursive, self-improvement, intelligence explosion, many things like this. And for me, like, that's the part where fun things happen, like where we have proper singularity, because at that point we get more bottlenecked by the laws of physics than by human intelligence that is evolved over hundreds of thousands of years, or human culture that is evolved over decades. For instance, if a human learns something, researchers, state of the art of their field, they learn something, they must coalesce the intuition, they red team it against a bunch of other people, they write a paper, the paper gets read by like the 5 most experts. Then, if those experts need it, they will cite the paper and will get spread a little, and then you will have the PhDs of the field that know the paper as part of the lore of the field, and then after a generation it might percolate to textbooks or PDFs for graduate students and so on and so forth. And at some point humanity has like some common knowledge of the thing, the same way that current high schoolers now know more about derivatives and things like this than people knew 500 years ago. With AI, the thing is very different. It's just the limits of what physics allows. So in practice, you can have a swarm of like billions of AIs. One learns a fact, gets spread to all the others in less than a second.
Yeah, this
and
is
that's it.
Geoffrey Hinton's thing about digital hive minds.
Yeah.
If I know a thing, I can just like copy it to
Exactly.
all of the other AIs. Yeah.
And so we basically get this type of stuff where an AI can just learn a fact instantly, whereas a human will need to do spaced repetition over months or something. And we hit like more the limits of like information theory once we go through this. And then it depends on what you expect this type of intelligence can yield. From our point of view, it yields technology that hits the laws of physics, the same way that with the internet and optical fiber, we have communication that is like at the speed of light. So in a way, we hit the laws of physics. We cannot have faster communication than this. And so that's the type of thing that I expect from superintelligence. I expect we just hit the laws of physics, on energy production, on communication bandwidth, on complexity theory, all this type of stuff. I expect at that point the technologies don't really seem human anymore. The impact is not measured, on the impact on a country. It's like solar systems and things like this, and it gets like way out of common human understanding. So this is what I mean by AI gets big. If you already assume this, in my experience, most of the skepticism dissolves. It's like, yeah, if we get there, things are going to be crazy, and it's unlikely that we survive something like this. That's usually what I get. But if you want, we can answer like further. Someone that already grants this premise, but still thinks with just iterative deployment, it'd be okay.
So I guess it's two sources of skepticism. One is people who just think, I have noticed this too, that like a lot of AI optimism, like people who are just like not worried about this, is actually AI skepticism. Like they just think that it's going to plateau at some point. Maybe like around human level or a bit higher, and we don't have to worry about it. So that's one thing. I think this seems like pretty, I just don't think we have any reason to think that would happen. But then I guess the other skeptical take is, okay, well maybe we will get this kind of automated AI R&D process, but there are just all these like physical bottlenecks in the real world. Like the AIs still have to do experiments, they still have to like, interact with physical reality, and that's going to be slowed down, at least initially, by having to go through us. Like at least initially it's going to have to go through people to like interface with the real world, and it has to build this sort of like self-sustaining automated economy that doesn't need humans to uphold it. And these people think that this will just be quite a slow process. Like maybe this takes years. And because it takes years, humans have more of an opportunity to intervene at various points. And maybe we can claw back some agency if we kind of like notice this is going in a way that we don't like.
I think this is not really a technical question. I don't know if you remember, if you watch like TV shows from 5 to 10 years ago, whether it is things like Person of Interest, which is a TV show that deals with AGI, or Travelers, which is a time travel TV show that has at some point AGI in it. Like in
I totally missed this.
There are nice TV shows. I think Travelers went a bit to shit when it started having AGI and superintelligence in it, but quite interesting. But the thing is that all those TV shows have the idea of an AI that is boxed. By boxed it means they are like in a private data center owned by the AI company itself and built by the AI company itself in a Faraday cage with no contact with the external world and things like this. I think in those worlds, like in those sci-fi TV show worlds, your question makes more sense. In our current world, I think the social reality, it's not a technical thing, it's just that right now we just connect AIs to everything.
Yeah.
There was the idea that we limit interactions between AI and humans because else AI will be able to manipulate humans. We'll limit interactions between AI and the internet because AIs can just exfiltrate themselves. We will limit connection between AI and physical reality, else AI can have those like self-sustaining autonomous processes directly. It's just not what has happened. We've just connected AIs to people, the internet, other AIs, robots. When I say robots, I mean both how do you call this, factory robots like arms, but also quadrupeds, humanoid robots and things like this. So I don't think really from our point of view, we'll get very quickly to AIs like actually interacting with the physical world, because from my point of view, we're already there. We already have like Terminators. Like we actually have humanoid robots like LLM powered. So I don't really think it's gonna be an obstacle, because it hasn't been, and like we've removed the obstacle. So possibly there's a question of how far we could have pushed it if we went with AI boxing, which I think is an interesting question, but it seems quite irrelevant in our current world.
Yeah, I guess like a boxed AGI is just not that useful. If you build the AGI, obviously the incentive is to use it for stuff, which means giving it permissions, connecting it to things.
I don't think it's the incentives. I just think it's what happened. We could clearly imagine that AGI companies, instead of doing this, build designs that were with the Faraday cages, and were like, how can we extract as much work as possible from like those boxed AIs using simulations and things like this, or building better models of reality, and doing more typical type of theoretical science. There's a lot that could have been done. It's just not what we've done. This is why I think it's not really a technical question, but more a social question. I think even talking about incentives here is like pseudo-scientific and wanting to rationalize something that was more cultural than ideological.
Yeah. I mean, I guess incentives are like born out of culture and ideology, right? I guess I see those as not that different. And especially, I don't know, there's like what the companies are incentivized to do, and then there's also like what governments are incentivized to do. Like presumably governments are going to be like, this seems like a really good thing to put into all of our military robots. Unless that they are super bought into the idea that AI is super risky and they should be really worried about it. That's like the first thing they're going to do, I'm assuming, is try to use this for like national security purposes, which seems like another way that it like runs out of control really fast.
I think those are, I don't know. It seems like one, it hasn't happened yet. So I'm like, they already had the incentives and it didn't happen. And two, even post hoc, I don't know, I worked on formal verification, and some of the biggest funders in formal verification are governments. Yeah. So I'm like, I could also see just going completely the other way around. Like,
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think incentives are like that powerful that we should talk about them. They're like laws of nature or something. I think they're pliable. Like we should definitely try and change them.
It's more, I don't think incentives is a good frame. I think it's mostly like astrology for nerds. I don't know if you see what I mean, but if you're in game theory and you have like specific rule set and like actual agents that have optimal strategies and things like this, you can talk about incentives, and here there is an actual formal meaning for the word. Now for me it just looks like pseudoscience for what I feel like people ought to do, or in their circumstances what they'll be rewarded. Not even, because sometimes we talk about incentives when there are no rewards. So it just seems like astrology for nerds to me. I don't take it very seriously when people talk about incentives.
That's fair. That's funny.
I don't like pseudoscience, and when pseudoscience comes from nerds, it's still pseudoscience. So.
No, fair enough. Okay, well, we'll taboo the word incentive, but yeah.
I think it's a good thing to do. It's genuinely
I'll think about that more.
Like it's funny because I see incentives being used, in two ways. One is I expect, my intuition tells me people will do X, so the incentives are for X to happen. It's used in that way. Yeah. So I just hear it when someone doesn't want to say their social intuition, they say the incentives.
Interesting.
So that's one.
Okay.
And the other way is one that they want to remove someone's responsibility from an action.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're wrong. It's like, it's my incentives, Gabe, you understand?
Yeah. You could use that as an excuse for everything.
And sometimes the incentives mean, it's in the guy's incentive to make money. It's in the guy's incentive to care for his family. It's in the guy's incentive to care for his career. And no predictive power at all.
I guess like on an individual level, you could use it to just rationalize away bad choices, but then on a macro level, like one example is like you see these like weird races to the bottom where people end up doing stuff that's in no one's interest. Like in these situations where if any one person kind of defects from something, it just keeps going. Like for example, like somebody
at naturalist curse.
Yeah, somebody at an AI company might be like, I'm really worried about safety. I think like my company is not building AI safely, and then they'll be like, well, I'm going to quit. And then what happens is like all of the safety conscious people leave and you're left with the less safety conscious people and the thing still happens.
Oh yeah, I think here the solution is not to leave. I think the solution is to actually participate in democracy, but yeah.
Oh, interesting. So you think like a safety concerned person at OpenAI should stay and...
I think whether they stay or not is not really relevant. I think it's mostly bad, for themselves as a person. As a person, it's bad to do a thing that you think is bad or evil.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's like truly deleterious to like you yourself as a human being. I think collectively the more relevant thing is, do they organize with other people to actually pass the type of regulation that they think is relevant to prevent the type of behavior that they think we should coordinate on preventing. We have built institutions to solve this very type of problems. This is like kind of how Western civilization has exploded and became epic and gave us all those good things. So I think the correct thing to do is to use those institutions. I think the decision of leaving or not is not the most relevant one from a collective standpoint.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
I think if you're already in the frame of me as an individual, what is the thing that matters the most, and so on and so forth, you kind of already forgot that this is a collective action problem, that it matters more what you do for coordination than what happens in your own life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you can participate in regulation like by being at OpenAI or without being at OpenAI. Then I just think it becomes a more personal thing. If you think that what OpenAI does is bad, do you want to contribute to it?
Yeah.
From my point of view, it just seems like nah. And it's not specific to OpenAI, like specific to doing something that you believe is bad for humanity.
Yeah.
I think this is soul crushing, and that most people become worse for it.
Yeah. I can imagine it would not be fun to show up at work every day and participate in a project you thought was going to doom the world.
Or you just become worse in that you twist your beliefs such that it fits. I have friends who describe talking to people working at OpenAI or Anthropic as copium maximalists and things like this. And I think it's the type of things that happen when you do something that you do not believe in.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think I can see the argument for trying to change the culture from the inside, but yeah.
I mostly think it's fake. Like in practice, it's a bunch of nerds that do this. They are not like politically savvy people who will like social engineer culture from the inside, even though you have like very powerful CEOs. Like if you talk about Sam Altman, he's like a very powerful person. He knows what he does and so on and so forth. It's not going to be a couple of nerds that will compete with him like culture-wise.
True. Well, I guess it's probably the more likely explanation is that most people who work at OpenAI just don't really believe that AI is that likely to be dangerous, and that's why they work there.
But I think you have a similar dynamic with Anthropic. You have the entire effective altruist movement that has defended the actions of Anthropic, and Dario with Holden joining Anthropic and so on and so forth. It's not a couple of nerds that will compete with this like massive mimetic pressure.
Yeah.
So this is one I think this is mostly fake. I think this is just not looking at the collective action problem and looking at what's actually needed to curtail those behaviors.
Yeah.
I think there are other things that you can look at the individual level which are like violent and things like this, but I think they're bad for other reasons. Namely, not on consequentialist grounds specifically, but for instance, violence is bad.
Yeah.
So, you can think as an individual and be like, how can I maximize my impact as an individual? But I think there are other considerations and just maximizing impact as an individual. Then I also think that on consequentialist grounds, it's bad. Right now, we live in a very peaceful world where we have institutions, we can trade with people, we can talk, we can pass laws. I think if people are more violent, we can use those nice methods less and less. So, I think we should look at what we like in our current world, like our institutions, peace, debate. And we should be like, how can we leverage those as much as possible? Which is why I like podcasts, which is also why with Control AI, we have the dip where we just talk to as many politicians as possible, inform them of what's up. And I think this is an underrated principle or meta principle.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. I guess the general cultural vibe that I see among tech people is the opposite of that, just being like very cynical about institutions and being like, institutions suck, they can't do anything, we can't trust them to handle this super fast moving technology because it will take them like, you know, take them 3 years, what would take us 5 minutes or whatever.
I cry every time.
Generally like it, yeah. I guess I mean, you can be cynical about governments, and I see why you would be, but also they're kind of like the best that we have for dealing with these kinds of problems, so it seems weird to dismiss them.
I think the situation is even worse, actually. I talk to nerds very often. I will ask them, why do you dismiss government so much? And they're like, oh, it's because politician X is like completely ignorant about the technical topic. They could never do like good regulation about the topic. How can you even trust them? And so on and so forth. And the thing that is quite important to understand is that, you know, politicians are humans. And as humans, they obey the laws of physics. So they cannot create information out of nowhere. So it means that at some point, there is like one of the technical experts that got, you know, the information from the field that must convey it to the politician. It's like if all the technical experts just spend their time screeching, like this chain of information is like physically not happening. And so, for instance, we've talked to many politicians like in the EU, in the UK, who just don't know much about AI, because in practice we're the first ones to tell them about, you know, what are the latest AI advances, what AI can do, things about X risk and things like this. And so, you know, a lot of nerds will complain about the state of institutions, but like they're a part of the institutions, you know, like the institution is not a separate process. The process in the democracy involves the citizens going, specifically a Republican democracy where you have representatives. It involves having the citizens like sharing their concerns with the representative, the technical experts sharing their knowledge with the representatives. If this doesn't happen, then like the citizens or the technical experts are not fulfilling their role.
Yeah.
And like the politicians not having the information is not a failure on the politician, it's a failure on the technical experts. And I think this is a thing that is like truly underrated when those people complain.
Yeah. No, I think I probably agree with that. I have to think about it more, but yeah, that makes sense. I want to get more into like how do we engage politicians and what we should do about this in a bit. I was trying to think of other skeptical anti-safety arguments. I guess one is I could be sort of like straw manning this argument. So like people would say, I don't know, like back in the day, Eliezer Yudkowsky would be like, oh, it's going to be super hard to like get AIs to understand our values. And we might tell them to do a thing and then they will just they've not internalized what we care about, and so they'll just like, go and maximize some like random weird objective. This is like the paperclip maximizer thing. You tell your AI, make paperclips, and then it turns you into paperclips. That's like a kind of reductive retelling of that story, but you know what I mean. And then people will say, oh, but if you talk to Claude, like Claude has internalized human values really well. Like Claude can philosophize about like ethics and morals, and Claude is really nice to people. And in fact, when Anthropic trained Claude to be helpful, harmless, and honest using their kind of like constitutional AI approach, they found that like those values are super robust. Like when they did that alignment faking paper that came out, some people read it in an optimistic way, because they were like, well, they tried to train these like helpful, harmless, honest values out of Claude, and then it really didn't want to be trained out of them, and it tried really hard to be good, even though everybody, you know, they were trying to get it to be bad. So these people would be like, why are the safety people not like updating? Like clearly it was way easier than they thought it was going to be to get these values to be robustly internalized in our AIs. This is just an argument that I hear people make sometimes. What would you say to that?
I think there are two separate things. The first one is more the Eliezer thing. I don't care much for it because I'm not Eliezer. But I think it's a fun one because Eliezer is like often triggered about this on Twitter.
Yeah, that's why I said I knew I was being reductive, because I feel like if he was in the room, he'd be like, that's not what I said.
Yeah, but like the thing that he says usually is that AIs will understand the values and just decide not to follow them. So that's one part, but I don't care much for it. Because from my point of view, Claude does not understand human values. It's just that there's a bigger thing, which is that most humans do not understand human values either. And so when they see Claude, they're like, whoa, it has an even deeper understanding than I do, ergo it must have figured them out. But I think it's like, a very ignorant way of thinking about the problem. Like the same way I wouldn't trust Claude boosted as an ASI to make the choices about humanity's future, there are many of those people that I would not trust either. So I think there's a thing where human values is like a much more complex topic than philosophizing, in a chat conversation. But that's actually the core. That's actually the core of the thing, is that human values are very complex, and by default you will miss like a lot of them. I can give many examples of this happening. For instance, I don't know, you have ideologies. I actually usually think of ideologies in terms of which human values they deny. So for instance, the libertarians deny all the values that have the shape of a positive duty. Like if you have a duty towards someone else to help them or whatever, the libertarians deny this.
Okay.
They only say that you have negative freedoms, but like negative rights and positive freedoms, but never the opposite. I won't do the communist because it's too easy. You have, the anti-natalist, where here they're like denying the value of just human existence.
Yeah.
So you have most of the ideologies are mostly defining themselves with like which values they consistently deny. And so, for instance, I wouldn't trust any of those ideologies with ultimate power. Even if they can understand human values, they still deny them. A lot of people in ideologies are very good at social manipulation. They still just deny those values. Another one is like individuals themselves. Just as a human, figuring out what you truly value is hard, because of compulsions, traumas, your environments, and so on and so forth. It's very easy to miss things that are important to you and then make yourself actively unhappy and like optimizing for life strategies that actively make you unhappy. And it's very easy to imagine that someone in this situation, in this samsara, with more power would screw themselves up. This is why, for instance, we try to keep people away from drugs that can strongly affect your mind, because then you just need to be in like one bad situation once to overdo them and get into an addiction cycle and so on and so forth. That's mostly how I see most things. It's like we haven't solved alignment. We don't know how to elucidate human values from individuals and then from groups and then realizing them like consistently. And Claude is very far from this. And so if you try to empower current Claude, you will have a flawed conception of human nature, of human values and things like this. And if you had an ASI that crystallized around this, we'd be like pretty screwed. And then it could extrapolate to what would be good for us over the long term at the scale of humanity or in those edge cases and things like this, but it just would not care. So
this is like two separate things. One is, does it understand what we care about? And the other is like, maybe it understands but it doesn't care about us.
And so right now it doesn't understand because our values are like more complex than what it can figure out. But ASI will. But it will crystallize its values in like current ontology. If you assume the current paradigm of alignment, like right now, Claude has an ontology of the world that is like not rich enough to understand human values. For instance, to care about human values, we have a lot of values that are about things in the future. So you must be very good at prediction, like much better than current humans are. It's sad because you can care about something and still be very bad at it. And the system that is you and your policy will optimize against your values.
Yeah.
And so I expect that Claude is like this right now. I expect that most individuals are like this right now. I expect humanity is like this right now. Like we still haven't solved alignment.
I guess it depends what you mean by solve alignment, because the version of solving alignment you're describing is like a very high bar. It's get these systems to, if it was like get it to understand and internalize like all of the, it would actually be impossible in principle, right? Because there's no such thing as human values.
I think there is, but that's a separate...
maybe, I guess, well, it just seems like people have such conflicting beliefs and preferences, and some people have very weird ideologies that like you or I would find crazy and vice versa.
But like that's kind of the point, is that how do you resolve those contradictions, what type of compromises you make, and so on and so forth.
I guess maybe the person who's like less concerned about this would just say that the bar isn't that high. It's like you want to get the super powerful AI to not kill everyone. That's like kind of a low bar. And in order for it to...
I think this is very fake. Like a lot of people care about much more than mere survival.
Sure. I guess maybe they would say, you want it to A, not kill everyone, and B, kind of be sufficiently uncertain about what it should do that it doesn't like try to optimize for some specific set of values, and I guess maybe it steps back a little bit, and so it like,
yeah, but like then I mean, now we're back into Eliezer territory. Is that you have an AI that doesn't optimize hard, you have an AI that optimizes hard. The AI that doesn't optimize hard like gets screwed by the AI that optimizes hard.
Okay.
If you're basically you're advocating pause AI, you're saying I will have an AI, but we will not use all of its power. Like it will stay back. And I agree, I think this is the sound strategy when we haven't solved alignment, but this is what the strategy is.
Sure.
I don't know how to put it. It's if the AI touches those places, then it's too dangerous. So for instance, this is a conversation I actually had with someone from Anthropic, which was about harmlessness. If you put harmlessness and you're like strong consideration of harmlessness, the AI never does anything that directly harms a human, you haven't solved alignment. Your thing will get destroyed by other AIs that do harm people. Any choice that you make in practice will harm someone. You walk around, you how do you call this? Splat?
Like you step on bugs? Or
Yeah, you step on bugs,
Yeah.
And every choice that you make sometimes, just by looking at someone fondly, you will make their day worse. And the more you exist in the world, the more people you will cause their suffering. If you are a CEO, you will take money away from your competitor. Is this a harm? Is this a direct harm? And so on and so forth. And then there are harms that you will cause directly that are not even edge cases, but are still worth. It's called trolley problems. And so you have many situations like this. And so either you solve what is the correct course of action in those situations, or, which is harmlessness, you say do not even engage in those situations. What happens is that you're saying pause AI. You're saying I have an AI which scope of power is like crippled and it cannot, like it is bounded and cannot engage with those situations. Then an AI that can just outcompetes it.
Yeah.
Because this is like such a big, area of like action, power, and so on and so forth. Like the incentives, here we can talk about incentives, we're talking about agents optimizing with an actual action set and so on and so forth, or to be able to take those actions. And if you're actually optimizing for alignment, not boundedness and pose AI, this is the actually correct course of action. Because you should make the hard trade-offs. You shouldn't say, I do not engage.
I have no counter-argument for that.
I think that the ostrich strategy of I refuse to engage with the hard trade-offs is like not a very morally aligned one. I think this is like morally defective. I think that people who are like, I will just not engage with hard choices are making things worse for others. Because the hard choices have to be made at some point. It's just there are fewer people dedicated to thinking about them, emotionally managing them, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So this is why. But from a point of view, this is what it means. At some point, like we have to solve alignment. There's no free lunch. Like your alignment with human values comes from somewhere.
Yeah.
And you can say it's from humans of the future, and AI does nothing. But then your solution is pause AI. You can say it's from AIs, but then at some point they must crystallize around values that end up with those.
Yeah.
Like, the universe is not aligned with human values. You take a human, you drop them in a random place in the universe, they die.
Mm-hmm.
You take a human, you drop them at a random place in Earth, they die. Like crust core. You take a human, you drop them at a random place on Earth, they die, middle of an ocean. Mm-hmm. It's like the universe is not aligned with human values. Like alignment with human values is a thing that takes a lot of like energy, effort, intelligence, like drive. And it's not a thing that you get by default.
Yeah.
And for me, like this was the core thing with climate change, is that we live in an unfair world. Like by default, we just don't get the correct outcome. Sometimes the universe is out to get you.
True.
And I think that's like the core moral of the story is that if we want good things to happen, we must actually work for them. And if we want, human values to not be systematically neglected, there must be a process that like elucidates those human values, like pins them somewhere, store them in some memory of some human on paper in some, hard drive, and then optimizes for them. And if they're not elucidated, then there's no process that can optimize for them. So if we don't figure out human values, we cannot optimize for them. except if we have a correlate of it that we can elucidate, that we optimize for. If you don't pin them down, they just degrade. We live in a world with entropy. If you don't optimize against entropy, then if you figure them out once, they just dissipate.
Yeah.
Like it can be bit rot, it can be books, how do you call this? When a book stays for a long time in some humid place, like they...
it just gets down.
They deteriorate.
Yeah, deteriorate, yeah.
And human memories, let's not talk about this.
Yeah.
And then you must have some actual optimization process. Because, natural entropy just uniformizes everything. It will not optimize for human values.
Yeah.
So, that's mostly how I see it. This is why I think in some ways I'm like more extreme than Eliezer. Like Eliezer, in his writing at least, is like very concerned about AI. From my point of view, even without AI, like assume, I don't know, there's an oracle or magical superpower that comes and bans any AI beyond human level, it's still not clear to me that we win.
Well, what do you mean by win?
Not kill ourselves.
Like on what? I mean, I guess on a long enough time scale.
Next 100 years, it's not clear that we don't build, technologies that can read people's minds, and we don't use it for like super dystopia.
Oh man.
In a very concrete term, we are close to mind reading technology, even more so with AI. It's not clear to me that we win in a world that has mind reading technology.
I mean, I think it would definitely be very unpleasant to live in.
That's what I mean. It looks like such a world with like our current institutions, the way we think about alignment, about moral values, about how good we are at achieving those moral values. It looks like it's quite a doomed world.
Yeah.
Just like on a very concrete technology that we can think about. This is what I mean. Even without AI, it's not clear that we win. This is why I think about control AI as gaining time, but right now with Connor we're also thinking about how do we move to a world where even if we're guaranteed timelines of 100 years, we feel good that we're gonna win. We feel like if we build like more mind reading technology, it will obviously be used only for good, and to the extent that it's used for bad, it's like recoverable and it doesn't send us to a dystopia. If we discover new energy sources that also enables people to buy nukes in their garage, it doesn't end up with everyone's blowing up. And right now I don't have this feeling. You see what I mean?
Well, when you put it like that, I also feel pretty pessimistic.
Yeah, but I think this is tractable. We built our current institutions, our current constitutions 250 years ago. It was like Enlightenment humanism and then liberal humanism in the US and things like this. It's like pretty old. It's like we vote once every 4 years and things like this. It's like right now with the internet, we can like clearly do better. When I say the internet, it's not only the internet, it's like modern science, complexity theory, game theory. Like we understand so much more, about human psychology, groups, agency, complexity theory, algorithms, coordination. Like we ought to do better than constitutions are like 250 years old. 250 years ago, let's say someone discovered the perfect organization structure. Just sending the message to everyone on Earth would have been like a Herculean task. Now we can do it in literally one click. So I wouldn't say I'm pessimistic. What I say is that on current track, it doesn't feel like we're winning. But it also feels that like with all the technological progress that we've been having in 250 years, since the West and modern constitutions were created, yes, like a win is not that far. Imagine you go, I don't know, to Voltaire, Montesquieu, and people like this, and you give them like the internet. Like, we have won. Like, what else? There's nothing else to solve. Like, you have free education for everyone. You have super cheap democracy. You can vote every week. You can poll the opinion of people. You can poll the opinion of experts. If tomorrow I as a president, I want to poll the opinions of all the PhDs in bioscience, like with the internet, it is possible. I can just have this. I can send an alert to all the experts in my nation and get their opinion if I want in less than an hour.
Yeah.
I think it's very easy to have a sense of normalcy about our current technological progress, and that the current order of like social networks and old constitutions is the incentives. It's the result of the incentives, and we can do better. I completely disagree with this. I think that if there was like mega genius that cares about the actual problems and things like this and dedicate like 2 years of their life to it. I think it's possible that there's like such a person that can come and gives us, a bill like for UK, the EU, the US. There's like clearly a Pareto improvement, clearly like epic constitution. Everyone agrees that we can do it. It's just a bunch of incremental improvements where we can always roll back. And as a consequence, at every step, we can check that it just makes things like way better. Like much more
competent.
just
like perfectly designed.
Not even perfectly, like not the perfect one, just like clear Pareto improvements with incremental improvements that you can roll back from. I think you need to be smarter and better than we are right now. I don't think it needs to be that much smarter. And I think that if we had such a roadmap, we could actually physically implement it in less than a month. When I say physically, I mean people 250 years ago could not do this. Like they could not bring back the message to the capital and the capital send back the message, to all the regions, departments, cities, and then change the processes such that they include this. Right now with programming, we literally can do this.
Yeah.
Like before, processes were not like an app. It was like you had people that will have to change all the forms, all the things that were written down, like we have to print them back and so on and so forth. It's not possible in a month. Like now it is like physically possible. So I think there's, I would say, a lack of optimism.
Definitely.
Again, this is why I say, imagine you bring the internet to like Enlightenment thinkers. Like,
yeah.
like, they came up with this, with votes and things like this at a point where there was like much less, everything infrastructure. There was no like mainstream public education. You didn't have roads that like we have right now. You didn't have cars. You didn't have, electricity. You didn't have any of those. And they still came up with this that we can use 250 years later. So yeah, I tend to think we can do clearly better than this.
Yeah. Let's talk about what you think we should do. I wanted to ask about, one document that you and Connor, I think, co-wrote is the compendium where you talk about everything we've been talking about so far, like why is AI scary, why is this hard? And then the policy proposal that you endorse to deal with this is a narrow path, which has a 3-step plan, if I'm remembering correctly. I think the first phase is basically have at least a 2-decade-long ban on the development of superintelligence. So this is like quite a controversial proposal in the AI safety space. I think a lot of people have, doubts about the feasibility of this. So one reason that you might think this is super hard is even if you could coordinate all the actors who exist now that could plausibly build superintelligence, that's already hard to convince all those people that this thing is super dangerous and they should stop doing it. But then a second problem is every year or all the time really, the number of actors that could do this is kind of increasing because you have these algorithmic efficiency trends, which mean that, say, whatever budget Anthropic might use today to build a state-of-the-art model, in 5 years, somebody could build that with, I can't remember the exact number, a tiny fraction, basically, of the budget. So it's kind of to design a pause that would last for 20 years seems like it involves kind of an unprecedented amount of coordination. And you also have this issue of the increased feasibility of decentralized training. So maybe, soon it will be the case that training runs that used to require one big compute cluster, you can do with lots of little ones that are harder to trace. And there's just all these trends which are making this process harder and harder to keep on top of, basically. How would you answer the person who just says, this is impossible, we can't pause this for that long of a time period?
It depends how friendly I am with the person.
You can go with the unfriendly version if you want.
No, it's actually the other way around, is that if I'm friendly with the person, I can afford to be more honest and be wow, let's be diplomatic instead. Let's assume I'm not friendly with the person. I think this is a worldview that doesn't factor in coordination, basically. We had nuclear anti-proliferation treaties that reliably worked. We got some nuclear proliferation in the 21st century. Not that much.
Yeah.
Most countries are not nowhere close to having the nuclear weapon. you can make a bunch of post hoc explanations. Oh, but it's hard to get nuclear material or something. But all the same applies. It's much easier now than it was like in the 40s. And like now all countries have state capacity. It's much easier to spy than it was in the 40s. In the 40s you had to send a spy to the other country, like a physical spy. Now you can just hack. Mm-hmm. You can do remote social engineering that many countries are very good at. Separate question. So I think the feasibility of like nuclear weapons has increased also a lot, but the non-proliferation treaties worked. Another one is just human cloning. All countries stood to gain from human cloning. Take your geniuses, clone them like 100,000 times, and you actually get your geniuses, in a Boca center. Reference to like Brave New World with the Bokanovskis, but like the Bokal babies. So you could have this, and we did not, and we have the technology for human cloning for more than 20 years, and it just got easier and easier every year. Like we're now much better at gene editing than we were more than 20 years ago, like gene sequencing, gene editing, any type of cloning and manipulation of mammals and things like this. So I think the worldview that you outlined just completely ignores this.
I mean, I guess it's just, I feel like I'm now sounding like the kinds of people that I would usually argue against, but like the upside of AI is just so much bigger than the upside of any of these other things, right?
I think this is extremely fake. Like the upside of having nuclear weapons.
There's the prospect of we could cure cancer with this stuff, or we could, just like automate everything, drive the value of labor to nothing. Like it's like I'm just going to use the word incentive again, but the benefit of
I think this
human cloning is.
Yeah, but I think this is pretty core to the worldview. Is that this is an extremely teleological worldview. This is not how it works in practice. I think this is Lamarck versus Darwin again. Like instead of thinking of like the possible benefits that are in the future, so cannot motivate the present. Retrocausality is not a thing in physics. I prefer to look at the existing like systems in place. If you look at governments, they will care much more about nuclear security right now than AI security. At least this was the case for the last forever years. Possibly this is going to change at some point. This has been the case historically. If this changes, it's because people are making a change. It's not a fact of nature, it's not a fact of the incentives, it's not a fact of the benefits. Like this has always been the case since the singularitarians made the case for the intelligence explosion. So you have to think, why is it the case now and wasn't the case like before? So I think teleological reasoning is like extremely bad in post hoc and like pseudoscience. Like I don't know, like for me this is like wow. Like in general the retrocausality I do not buy. So that's one. The other thing about AI to remember is that it's a thing that is mostly driven by nerds rather than armies. And so if tomorrow AI, like AGI, research into AGI becomes illegal, like all the projects stop.
True. I think this is just because we're still, maybe we're now on the cusp of this moment where the government realizes the sort of like strategic significance of AI, but I think once they realize this, it will not just be driven by tech nerds anymore. It will be like like nation states will be.
Yeah, but I think this is still it will still be much slower than what we have right now.
Yeah.
And I expect it will be much more coordinatable than what we have right now.
Yeah.
Right now, it's done by private companies that are lobbying against any type of regulation. Of course, it's not like coordinatable.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
So I think that if it's in the actual hands of governments or the entities that are dedicated to coordination, and if you look at regulations, they always came from governments, not self-regulation from companies and so on and so forth. So I think step one is to actually outlaw it. And once this happens, all the open source stuff just stops.
Do you think it would be like if you tomorrow found out that the US government were like, we're going to have a Manhattan project for AGI, and they've shut down, like they've not literally nationalized, but basically in effect nationalized all the companies. There is now one centralized AGI effort happening in the US. Presumably at this point they're still like motivated by like a race with China, so they're still like trying to build this. But do you think that world is like better than the status quo or worse?
I think it mostly depends on the circumstances.
Yeah.
For instance, a world where like the Manhattan project is to race as fast as possible and actually coordinates well, DeepMind, Anthropic, OpenAI, and Meta, then I think it's a bad one. If it just will avoid like race between companies, and instead of a race to the bottom, we do race to the top, or we try to build it proper and so on and so forth, I think it's still a pretty doomed world, but I think it's a much better one.
Yeah.
If at the same time it outlaws open source research, I think it's an even better one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so there's two arguments. One is about like the feasibility of pausing AI research for a long period of time, and then the other one is kind of about like the desirability of doing that. Because one argument is, okay, well, maybe what we need is AI to do AI safety research. And these people would say, oh, we need to get to this threshold, but we're going to have this automated like AI safety researcher, and it's basically going to solve alignment for us. I'm like skeptical about this.
Yeah, exactly. At that point, it's not very interesting anymore.
Yeah, but I guess these people would say, okay, well, if you pause now and then you try to solve alignment without advancing the frontier, like you just can't do that. You can't solve alignment in isolation without simultaneously improving the systems, and also now you're trying to solve alignment without the sort of aid of the more powerful AIs that you would have been developing had you not paused, that could have helped you with this super difficult technical problem. So I guess those people would say, okay, so even if you pull off your 20-year pause and then all the best minds in the world all have their like Manhattan Project for safety and they try to work this out, they're just not going to work it out. And then once you unpause, you've basically just given up the opportunity to have done this kind of in tandem with like advancing the frontier of AI.
Yeah, and you can still do it in tandem with advanced frontier AI 20 years from now. It's just you have 20 more years of preparation to do this, rather than in race to the bottom that we have right now. So it's just more optionality. So that seems like very fake. That's the first one. The second one is just, I think using LLMs for alignment research is fake, in the sense that core problems of alignment research are things like understanding human values, what type of plans are like good to achieve human values and things like this. This implies a lot of progress, I don't know, in sociology, moral philosophy, political philosophy, global coordination, effects of actions at the scale of humanity and things like this. And LLMs have not helped with this.
Yeah.
Like we're not better at morals than we were since GPT-3. I don't think we're better at morals than we were like 20 years ago. I think we've mostly stalled on the whole solving morals type of thing. I don't think our constitutions are like meaningfully better than they were 50 years ago. And I don't see LLMs helping with this like in any way. It just seems like super fake and not born out of the real world. It doesn't seem like we're better at global coordination thanks to LLM.
Well, I guess like current, but we're talking about like current LLMs. But if we really think these things are like actually intelligent,
but then it's not based on, it's not empirical anymore. It's just you're saying, oh, possibly later we'll have a nice, they will be powerful enough that they're useful with those big topics, but not powerful enough to actually enact plans. And this seems very fake, because once you get to topics that are like humanity scale, like what is the outcome of plan A versus plan B at the scale of humanity? This type of things like requires experimentation. It requires actually interacting with the world, and this is the type of stuff that should be done on human terms, not AI terms. Like it should be us that experiment with the world and we see what happens. So an example that I like is that in the French Constitution, like 15 to 20 years ago, there was a thing that was enshrined, which is the right to experiment. So you can pass laws as experiments. It wasn't used, super sad, but young me was like hyped about it. It was like, wow, this is gonna be a new era. We're now gonna actually experiment with laws locally, and this lets us like take much bigger risks. Like we can try to have a city where we remove the minimal wage, have a city where we triple it, we see what happens. Did not happen.
That would have been cool.
Like genuinely so. I think there should be at least a state that does, their anarcho-capistan town and their communist commune. Yeah. We see what happens. Yeah, I think we ought to have this. A city that has the most top-down modernist zoning possible, and a city that just removes all zoning rules, and we see what happens. I think there should be
volunteering to go live in the experiment
city. I will volunteer in a couple of experiment cities.
Yeah.
It depends which one.
Yeah.
But there are some that I would not, and I think it's part of the experiment. Who would go there? If no one wants to go there, it tells you a bit about this city. You see what I mean? Yeah. So then I think we could have done things like this. I think if we want to solve alignment, it's the type of stuff that we actually have to do. We have to experiment with different group norms. We have to experiment with different ways of managing cities, countries. We have to experiment with different types of global coordination. and we have to experiment with different ways of elucidating human values. We should become better at taking a person and saying what they truly value and what will bring them happiness. It's not really a science that we have improved on in the last 50 years. And I don't see LLMs helping with. I don't mean they cannot. I mean, in practice, they have not.
Sure. I mean, yeah, but I guess that's just... You could say this about most things that that AI will do in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
You could be like, oh, well, AI will never cure cancer because it hasn't yet. But the point is, like, they're getting better, right? And that's also what we're worried about.
I think a big thing is that the bottlenecks from a point of view to solving those problems is not having better AIs.
Yeah.
We can talk about any of those problems. Like the bottleneck to better global coordination is not AI.
Yeah. Well, I guess because it's two different things. It's like using the humanities to figure out what our values are and like what we actually want society to look like, and like solving moral philosophy and doing all these things. And there's like the technical problem of, okay, once we've figured out all of that, like how do we get these systems to actually reliably do what we said? Like how do we get them to stop reward hacking or like lying or like doing all of this stuff?
I think the bottleneck is much more the former.
Yeah.
Like in the former, you also have like problems of like agency. So what does it mean to have an agent? What does it mean to have values? Like with human values, we're okay with some value drift and not others. You're a child, you like sweet stuff. As an adult, you dislike the extra sweets and you like some other things. Instead, you don't feel like you have betrayed your child self.
Sure.
There is some value drift that you consider okay because we have such a thing as meta values that state when we're okay with changing our values and things like this. And if you think more about it, then you can think about when it's okay for AIs to do so. It's just we're like so primitive on this type of thinking. It's like we're very far from this. And even if AIs could help with this, you still have all the current bottlenecks that we have. Let's say you have one guy that solves like this thing. It's like solves a major sub-problems of morals. Well, we have the problem that morals is not a science, in that we don't have, benchmarks, measures of progress, standard definitions that everyone agrees with. So it means even if this guy finds a thing, aided with LLMs, the guy has no way to convey this to the rest of humanity. We don't have a process that teaches this to the rest of humanity. We don't have a process that will integrate this into building better constitutions, laws, and public education programs. Like, this is what I mean by AI is very far from being the bottleneck. For me, it's like really strange ideology where you look at the current world and you're like, well, the bottleneck to like human flourishing is AI.
Yeah.
That's mostly how I feel about the thing. I
guess, I don't know, like intelligence is kind of how we have crafted a society that is better than the one that we used to live in, right? And if we just had more of that, like in principle, I can see why people think that would be.
I actually don't buy this thesis much. I think this is, a way in which I'm quite different from like the AI safety community, is that when I think about academics and the lack of progress in many fields, same as morals and things like this, I don't feel like the bottleneck is intelligence. I feel like the bottleneck is that you have a bunch of nerds that love their specific topics and just wants to work on those topics and nothing else. I say this as someone that has created multiple technical teams where, I'm like, let's solve this problem. A bunch of nerds tell me, yeah, we love this. But actually, they just want to work on their specific approach, regardless of the evidence. It's just they like their specific approach.
Well, then if you had like a bunch of AIs that didn't have those kinds of preferences and weren't getting like nerd sniped by
the thing is that right now, this feels more like the bottleneck than intelligence. I've had a bunch of people that were like much smarter than me, but were still working on things that were utterly useless. I was just answering to that point. I think that right now, paradoxically, we're much more like constrained by alignment than like intelligence. I think we already have more geniuses than we know what to do with, and we're not like deploying them on any of the most important problems. So that's one. Another problem is not compulsions, and restricted interest is the opposite of this, is like traumas. Like we've talked a bunch of time about people like, underrating coordination, talking to politicians and things like this. I think this is mostly downstream of traumas. A bunch of people react badly to authority, like literally, and they see politicians as like high authority. A bunch of people dislike making phone calls.
Yeah.
A bunch of people dislike talking to people who disagree with them. And like politicians, we talk to politicians, they disagree with us a lot. It's not pleasant. And if, something being not pleasant is reason enough not to do the thing, then it's reason enough not to do the thing.
Yeah.
And so here I know a lot of people that are like much smarter than I am, but just never talk to politicians like ever. Even in cases where they have a lot to bring, it will be like super good for them to do and so on and so forth, they just don't. And so I think those people becoming smarter would actually be a disaster for humanity. I don't want those people to become more powerful. I think a lot of them are like morally bad. I think the lack of vocabulary around morals is also a bottleneck. What I want to say is they're evil. But the problem is that when we say evil, it's only understood as fuck out group or evil max. It's not understood as a spectrum. Whereas when I mean evil, I mean a very good predictor of their behavior is that they will systematically discard various moral principles. Like the more evil someone is, the more moral principles they will systematically discard. And so let's not use the word evil, but I think a lot of those people will systematically discard a lot of moral principles. And so I don't want them becoming more powerful. I don't want them becoming smarter, and I don't see them becoming smarter being the bottleneck to humanity's going to a better path. I think there is a need for some intelligence. Below some intelligence are some processes that you cannot learn or that will take you like way too much time to learn, some inference gaps that are like hard to make and things like this. But I think past this threshold, it's not really the bottleneck anymore.
So is your claim like we have enough raw intelligence within humanity to like, for example, cure all diseases? But the problem is that we just have all these misaligned geniuses hanging around that like could do this, but they are like either because they're like not principled enough to work on it or because they're just like interested in other stuff. They're just like not doing that.
So just to be clear, I think we can always benefit from more intelligence.
Okay.
The same way we can benefit from more energy, we can benefit from more resources. It's just I don't think it's the current bottleneck. And I think that at the margin, it's not even clear whereas, if we got more intelligence, whether it will be a net good or net negative for us. So for this one, I like the curing all diseases. For me, I'm not even thinking of curing all diseases. I'm thinking of eradicating like death and aging, more like this. And this ought to be one of the most important projects of humanity. Like, we all die, second by second. Like, time passes and our time span shortens by that much. We've all seen people close to us die. We all see people close to us dying. I think it's a universal experience that it sucks. And that it sucks doesn't start to cover it. And obviously, from a point of view, it should be like one of humanity's like global priorities. We should have, the death counter. We should have the top 10 most important problem in like solving aging, solving death, and we should have our best guess estimate at how far we are in each of those problems. And I don't care. It can be one guy's guess, with a whiteboard like this one, drawing it on a whiteboard, putting it on the camera in the entire world. And it's this guy is the guy we think is like a reasonable guess for those things. And for me, in a world that is like better at coordination and that actually leverages technology, there should be this like video feed that I can go to and I see what are the latest updates. It's like we're not taking the problem seriously enough, and I don't think the bottleneck is IQ.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's because it's like a fiendishly hard problem to solve death, so we've like culturally conditioned ourselves to see it as inevitable to the point where now there's a weird like social stigma around the idea of getting rid of death, right? Like most people, if you ask them, would you want to live forever? They would be like, no. Because we've kind of been conditioned to think it's kind of icky to aspire to immortality, right? But yeah,
I can make many...
But I think I'm agreeing with you because I'm saying it's not necessarily like the case that if we all tried really hard to solve this, we couldn't do it.
Yeah. But this is an interesting one, is that like where your mind goes when you think of this, it's like traumas and things like this. And I think this type of stuff is much more often the bottleneck than like raw IQ or more facts. And I think... if you hear what I said and so on and so forth, that this is not specific to curing all diseases or eradicating death. I think it's the same thing for global coordination. I think there are a bunch of compulsions, traumas, result of entropy, institutions decaying and no one putting in back the effort to maintain them, trolls where you have, predatory ideologies that are like spreading anti-human values and things like this. And I think the result of all of this puts us in a situation that is much worse than where we should be given current level of public education, like everyone is much more educated than they were like 250 years ago, given current level of technological development and so on and so forth. And it doesn't feel like the last 20 years were that great for human happiness and human flourishing. I think there should be a reckoning that, the technological progresses, techno-optimist thesis of just more technology will be enough to yield everything is now kind of failing, and that it becomes more obvious, where your mind went, where you're like, why we're not eradicating death right now, is that there are deep generators, deep streams, deep causes for why we're not doing those things. Mm-hmm. And it's the same type of thing that makes me say that possibly more intelligence at the margin is not good. Even human intelligence, let alone misaligned AI.
Yeah.
I think this is a thing that is quite anxiety-inducing. It's not only an AI problem. It's even without AI, it's not clear that we win.
Yeah.
And I think this one is the thing. I think it's my bigger crux with most people. It's for me, it's not clear that if you double IQ of 1,000 people, we win.
I mean, I feel like that's also I don't think that's clear either.
For me, it's not clear that we end up in a better world.
Yeah.
For me, it might be that you just get ultra competent sociopaths that
I think it depends on the people.
I don't even know if it does. That's the thing. I think with our current thing, it might be that if you just uplift various people, even the saintest people, they just crystallize around bad values. Mm-hmm. It might be that their saint values are holier than thou morality that makes everyone miserable.
Yeah.
And my problem is that I don't know enough about alignment, I don't know enough about values, that I see that this is an obviously good thing to do.
Sure. You're just kind of saying that maybe optimizing really hard for something is always bad, and intelligence just always makes you better at doing that. So
something like this.
Yeah.
And right now, I'm not confident that we should optimize hard for anything. I think we should have a lot of uncertainty, using a lot of deontology, working much more on coordination, working much more on alignment, and focusing more on bootstrapping to a place where we're confident enough in our alignment science that we can optimize hard, rather than trying to optimize hard right now. It would be a nice way to represent my beliefs in that frame.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But once we're there, coincidentally, I also became much more optimistic about AI alignment. It's if we're confident in how to build, groups of people that are aligned, we're confident that we can take a person and help them flourish and not, systematically deny their own values. We can zero-shot building better constitutions. We can think well about the outcome of humanity scale, experiments, technological deployments, and things like this. In a world like this, I'm much more optimistic about AI alignment. I wouldn't be let's fucking go, because it's still quite risky, but I'd be yeah, we can do it. I'd be possibly Manhattan Project right now makes sense.
Wow.
And in a world where we have the death counter and the erasing death counter, in a world where we have updated our constitutions, in a world where people take global coordination seriously, people talk to their politicians and there's a feedback loop, in such a world, I don't know, I expect everyone will be more optimistic. And I think there's a pervasive feeling that we're not in such a world, that the world right now is not like this and might be worsening. And I think to most people this is quite obvious, at a deep level.
Yeah.
It's another topic.
Yeah, I mean...
Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I mean, it's interesting. I agree with all of that. Let's talk a bit about... So, Control AI has this direct institutional plan. So, step one is, design policies that would actually work to mitigate AI risk. And then, obviously, step two is engage policymakers to get them to take this seriously. So, that second part, Control AI even managed to get quite a few UK MPs to sign this statement that was about how AI poses an extinction risk and we need binding regulations. I don't think it says what the regulation should be exactly, but it's kind of when I saw this, I was surprised that
model violation.
that so many MPs would sign on to something that was like this strong. So yeah, like how did you do that? Basically.
What is the secret sauce?
Yeah.
I laugh because it's written online. Like that's the entire point of the dip. This is how we do it. Like we cold mailed every MPs. We asked for a meeting about the problem. A bunch of them said yes. We made the case for the problem, explained to them for 30 minutes to the best of our understanding. At the end, asked them if they were willing to sign a statement supporting binding regulations, to address the problem or support a campaign and things like this. And a third said yes.
So how many is that?
Right now, around 30.
Oh, that's pretty good. That's like even more than I thought. Okay. Yeah.
So
I mean,
so I think this one should. If you think that I'm not lying, you should now immediately discard the opinions of a lot of policy experts.
I mean, I guess I can believe that if you do an elevator pitch for AI is going to kill us to a bunch of people, a lot of them would be willing to sign a statement that says we should do something about that. But if you
But I'll be more specific.
If it was more like, oh, I have a bill here, would you endorse this bill?
Just a bunch of them are asking us for the bill and we're drafting it. But that's
sweet, okay.
That's a separate question. No, I'm saying before that, we talked to many policy experts, AI safety experts and people like this. Mm-hmm. And a bunch of them were like, you will never get a UK MP to sign on a thing that mentions extinction risks.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay,
and they were like, kind of this is clearly outside of the Overton window and so on and so forth. No one will do this, you should not do this, you should play strategically, you should do the inside game and things like this.
Yeah.
And I think those people are not epistemically wrong, I think they're morally wrong. I think they're so morally wrong that it corrupts their epistemics.
Interesting.
I think the causal arrow is in this direction. I think they just love playing like House of Cards or the TV show with Frank Underwood, shrewd U.S. congressman wanting to become president, or Succession is a more recent TV show. Playing like manipulation games behind the scenes, meeting, not saying what you think, saying things that you don't think. And they just love this.
Yeah.
And I think they love this because morally they love pulling this type of shit. They feel powerful and so on and so forth, and they feel that they're on the inside. And they can increase like their reputation and things like this, and I just think it's bad.
Yeah, it's just kind of weird that like the Centre for AI Safety statement from a couple of years ago that says mitigating the risk of extinction should be a priority or something like that did get a lot of buy-in. I mean, not from like politicians specifically, but even like lab CEOs. And you'd think if extinction was such a taboo thing to talk about, that was like that far out the Overton window, like that would never.
Yeah, but like you didn't have many politicians sign this statement, so that's one. And the second one is the AI safety community did not really leverage it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
I mean,
yeah.
I can tell you, like, until we did it, no one in the UK did it, and like we plan to do it in the US because no one in the US did it either. It's even worse than this. A bunch of people asked us, how did you get so many meetings? And we're like, just cold email, and then they did not do it. For them, like getting a meeting with a congressman was like a thing. Another one was there were a bunch of people who tried, and they told us, and they were like, "Oh, it worked." Like they got the meeting, and the guy was convinced, and they were like, "So what did you do then?" Nothing.
Oh. Well. Yeah.
And at that point, there's not much I can say while staying nice. It's like.
Yeah.
Like, what will be a logical next step if it worked? Do it more. But it's not a thing. It's just like in a bunch of those meetings, you also have sometimes politicians who disagree with our assessment, and so want to talk about it more. Is there any crux? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, and feels bad.
Yeah.
We know a bunch of people when they were in similar situations were like, "Oh, those politicians are fucking stupid." So, I don't know. I assume that the politician is human. I assume they don't want to die. So I assume there's a reason why they think this. if there is someone who have invested, resources in the topic, like understands the topic, and now is acting against the interest of humanity, like willingly and so on and so forth, I can understand trying to demonize them or whatever. If we're talking about a politician, it's like their first exposure, like, bruh.
Yeah.
Like, you should not expect people to just agree with you. I don't know how to put it.
Yeah.
This is a very common sentiment. It's that if someone disagrees with you, it's because they're stupid or evil, and something like this. I tend to disagree. I think sometimes people are evil, but rarely it's because they disagree with me. There are a bunch of people who agree with extinction risks, yet they consistently lie. They will not represent their true opinions, and they will do manipulations, behind the scene type of stuff, and so on and so forth. And you have a lot of people who do not believe in extinction risk who do the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, and this has been like one of my historical problems with the AI safety community. Like, I wrote a post about this like a couple of years ago. That it's like, lying is bad. And then a bunch of people went, you can't say this, it's important to play the inside game, you will not make me stop like misrepresenting my beliefs, blah blah blah. This is beautiful.
That's funny, but then there is like another like hard aspect of EA or like rationalist culture that's just like really into radical honesty.
Yeah, I like this part, but you have many people who do not. And I think you also have a bunch of people from the rationalist community that also did not. Like, you had a bunch of early plans that were like, nope, the general public will not understand, they might even disagree, and we should do it against them. Like, we should raise to AGI, despite what they want, and so on and so forth. Like, there's an early piece of writing from Eliezer about specifically this. It was like he was 20 or 20. I think I said worst things when I was 20 or 21. Or possibly not that old, but when I was younger. But my point is that it's not Eliezer bad. He changed his mind, and I respect his current opinion. And he wrote a lot about honesty, meta-honesty, and things like this, and that's a thing that he thinks a lot about. My point is more like, this was a meme. This was a big meme in the rationalist circle, that you should not be honest with governments. So I think there's a radical honesty things, but I think it's more modern. And I think it was just a big meme that no, government should not be in the know, most people will be too stupid for this, and so on and so forth. And I think those things are like genuinely morally bad.
Yeah. I mean, even if you thought that like people weren't gonna understand, which obviously they will because it's not that hard, but like concealing, or like deliberately concealing an issue from people which affects them is like bad.
Yeah.
Just like on principle, if you know about a thing that is maybe going to impact people, you should tell them about it.
That's my point. From my point of view, it's like the opposite of humanism. In humanist principles, the way you do things is you do a lot of public education, people become more aware, and you build trust by doing this. And this is this trust building exercise that let people elect representatives or defer to specific authorities and things like this. If you start being like, I'll conceal stuff, you're like completely... how do you call this? Violating the social contract that we have. Like, the precise thing that gave you those nice conditions is because people in the past did not do that. To the extent that a lot of people did that, we're in a worse society for it.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, it's like obviously morally bad to act in that way. I think, it's okay to do morally bad things. It doesn't mean you're a bad person forever. I'm not religious or whatever. I think you can do bad things in the past and change. I think you can change your mind, which I reckon Eliezer has done. And I respect people for changing their mind publicly. I respect people for being honest publicly, even when it's at cost, and so on and so forth. So there is this radical honesty meme in some rationalist circles. I just think there are other memes that are also bad.
Yeah.
you have both.
No, I mean, that makes sense.
But, Eliezer with Miri I think right now Miri is doing a communication campaign specifically about just being honest. Eliezer has done a couple of years ago, the Bankless podcast episode.
That is the thing that, like, AGI killed me, I think.
Yeah, but I think those were great things.
Yeah.
At some point, there's a sad one. Eliezer did a debate with Paul Cristiano, where they both were more honest.
Yeah.
And they stopped doing it because it didn't seem that useful to them, if I recall correctly. I think this was super sad because the comments to the debate was, whoa, this is epic. I now understand their point of view more. I did not consider those arguments. I'm changing my mind, and so on and so forth. Around the time when Eliezer was speaking publicly, you also had Sam Altman that started in his things addressing Eliezer's points. And there was a comment on Twitter that I loved. It was like, wait, if you look at this podcast interview from Sam Altman, he's addressing the point from Eliezer in this other podcast. It's like they're having a debate through interposed podcast. I was like, you're this close to rediscovering like the public forum. Like,
that's funny.
Like you're so close. Like you're almost there, buddy.
That's funny.
And that's how I feel about things. I think there should be like way more conversations, way more public debates, way more people being honest. I love this. I think it's great. I think this is how we build better societies. I think this is how we become more resilient. I think this is how we converge to truth. I just think this is much more of a bottleneck than raw IQ, for instance.
Yeah. That seems like it could be true. Yeah. So we've got like, how do we engage politicians? Your answer was like, just email them.
Yeah, like literally contact them, teach them.
Yeah.
Don't try to push an agenda. If you have a specific agenda, be clear about it. For instance, we believe extinction risks are big. We believe this type of regulation is needed. Go to them, explain.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I don't think it's like not a very hard pitch to make, because it's just kind of like,
people just don't.
Conveniently, a bunch of experts have gone on record to say they're worried about this, so you can just show them that.
And we're leveraging it in our statement.
Yeah.
It's just people do not do this.
Yeah. So I guess like relatedly, if a normal person whose like day job has nothing to do with any of this, who like doesn't really know that much about it, has just found out that AI is scary and dangerous, and they want to do something, what should they do?
I'm going to say a thing that I do not think is limited to AI. I think this is more like civic duty in general.
Yeah.
I think the question is a good one. I also think it's a sad one, because the Western world has, I think, given up on the idea of civic duty. Because if it did not, my answer will be like the most trivial answer possible, which is pursue your civic duty. But I'll unfold in like concrete ways. One is you contact your local representative.
Yeah.
You ask for a meeting and you want to explain them the problem and see where they stand on it and so on and so forth. Just inform them. Another one is you do the same thing in your political party. So you find the political party that matches your beliefs the most. You join the political party and you go to the meetings and you explain the problem and you try to push it as a priority, through the ladder. And the last one is you go to a non-profit and you can donate or join it, and you try to help its like communication operations and things like this. I think those are the core bits of like civic duty. The institutions. So I talked about the local representatives can be the mayor, and the mayor can push for an awareness campaign in the city, with the ad spots that are owned by the city. Can direct to a non-profit in the city that is like safety conscious or something like this. It can be the MP. Depending on your profession, it might just be someone in the administration that is relevant. So if you work in healthcare and you're worried about AI and healthcare, you can write to Secretary of State in healthcare or something like this. So that's for the institution aspect. Then same thing, for the political party. I think people are not really interested in joining political parties anymore. I think it's sad. I will recommend like joining one to someone who wants to work on the topic, but just as an already employee at another company is doing something else. So I think political parties are great for this. If you do not have time to do your personal lobbying, personal interaction with the MPs, then join political party. That's what they're for. And the last one is going to a non-profit directly. If you have some extra time or some extra energy at the end of your day and you think just contacting your MP or just joining a political party is not enough and you want to do more, then I think being a volunteer at a non-profit is like a great thing to do.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
There's some good, easy, actionable steps that, if you're listening and you're worried about AI, do at least one of them.
But not only about AI, if you care about any collective problem, like not a thing that's just your personal interest or just you and your family, but if you care about any collective problem, I think you should do those. Ideally, a year from now, we might get a global institution where you can do the same thing at the global institution.
That'd be nice.
But we're still relying on infrastructure that dates back from 150 years ago. We don't have this. Like right now, the main decision points are like cities and countries. It is what it is, and we use those. But possibly enough people do this, and enough people start thinking about doing this, but in the context of the 21st century, that we build the first, global democratic institution, and people can just participate there too. I would love that.
Yeah.
We have the technology for it. We can globally vote.
Yeah. It's so hard to I don't know, my whole thing is trying to communicate about AI safety, and I've been trying to do this for 2 years now, ever since I got freaked out about it. People who I know, from my other life that has nothing to do with this, it's not that hard to convince them that AI safety is an issue, right? You can just be here are the experts saying the thing, here are the argument's pretty simple, and they'll be yeah, makes sense, sounds scary. But then the emotional saliency part where they actually care and are motivated to do something about it is way harder. So they'll just be another thing to worry about. Well, I guess, humanity's kind of doomed anyway. What's for lunch? I literally just can't do the second part. It's a real issue.
But, we're back to the thing. Do you think the bottleneck is IQ?
No, not at all. I think it's emotional bandwidth.
I think it's a pretty big one. I think it's even worse than this. I think in the last 20 years, we've just bludgeoned people to death with everything is an extinction risk, Immigration, extinction risk. Racism, extinction risk. All of those existential. I think people right now are kind of dulled.
Yeah, well, one of my other things is just gatekeep the word existential harder. Stop using it for everything.
The ship has sailed. It has been used.
Yes, totally so.
It has been used for everything.
Yeah.
So basically, the way I think of the situation, we gave up on democracy. We still wanted people to do things. So instead of going for civic duty, we'll guilt trip them and polarize them and anger them and outrage them as much as possible to activate them, rather than doing the regular civic duty type of stuff. And people can only stress so much until they burn out. I think we're more in the slow burnout stage of things.
Yeah.
And so I think having back to a healthy way to engage with institutions, not trying to everyone optimizing as much as they can independently, and you have 3 AGI companies all racing for safety, and it's I want to grab this can with my left hand and the right hand slaps it and try that's how it feels. It's everyone is fighting each other for what should be the same thing. I think we truly should chill the fuck out. Back to what's an actual healthy way to relate to this problem, and what's the actual healthy way to try to coordinate around this problem. And I think step 1 is try to leverage our institutions and then debug where they fail.
Yeah.
Possibly with Control AI, we talk to all politicians and we only get 20% support, and we have a bill, and possibly once it's a bill, the support lowers even more, and we get 10% support, and that's not enough. And now we must think about what to do after this. Possibly trade favors, possibly think of how we have a compromise with the bill that favors those politicians, possibly double down on education and do actually even more education, possibly ask people to put more pressure on their politicians instead of just informing them, being no, I'm a citizen, I care about this topic and I will vote based on this. But I think all of those only come later. I think before increasing stress level, you must do the healthy thing first. And if you increase stress level, it should be temporary and it should be only because it's warranted. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be the mainline way of doing things.
Yeah.
So I think this is a big conversation. I just don't think it's one specific to AI safety.
Yeah.
I think it's more as humans, as humanity, how do we want to solve collective problems? Mm-hmm. Do we want everyone to be a superhero trying to all build everything from scratch by themselves and fight the other superheroes? Should it be ideologies that just deny, wide aspects of human values and just try to bank on outrage? What do we want? Do we want to actually bet on our institutions, or do we want to be oh, but politicians are stupid, it's useless? And I think it's an actual question that everyone has to answer for themselves. Mm. The world is what it is. There are the levers that it has, and you must decide which ones you want to use. I think, we are doing the direct institutional plan at Control AI. I think this is enough of an explanation for what I think we should do. But I think this is a personal question. And I think for a lot of people, they're like have to literally heal from trauma related to like politics and big problems. I don't even mean this as a metaphor. I mean it like very literally. I think a lot of people got burnt by politics and big problems.
Yeah.
And now there must be a way to restore this. And I think trying to play the institutional game for real, without expectation, just doing this step one and we see what happens after, is like a good thing for many people. There's always a strategy of the ostrich and the head in the sand, but I think it's bad for many reasons. I think it's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not only collectively. I also think personally, you have a bunch of people that are selfish bastards, sure, but you also have a bunch of people that actually care for others and that feel bad about not doing anything.
Yeah.
And for the selfish bastards, I won't try to pressure them or whatever. Possibly if we're reduced to this, we're reduced to this. But right now, I'm more thinking of people who want to do something for others and just don't know how to do it in a way that is healthy. That is not about, insulting the out group. That is not about spending more time on social media or TikToks or whatever. That is not about going to an ideology that just wants to funnel their outrage for personal gains of the people at the top of the ideologies. And I think this is a good one.
Yeah. Nice. Cool. I think we should probably wrap up soon. I want to end on that because it's vaguely optimistic note, so people should...
Vaguely optimistic.
It's pretty optimistic, yeah. People, I say
it.
vaguely because this is like a doomy subject, but people can leverage do their civic duty and not be an ostrich. And email their MPs.
Join a political party, join a non-profit, depending on your time investment.
Yeah.
But I think those are good things to do, and we can see after that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Step by step.
Cool. Yeah, this was so fun. Thanks so much for making the time. And where can people follow what you're doing with Control AI and Conjecture?
So I think the handle for Control AI is like @AI_CTRL on Twitter.
Yeah, I'll link it in there.
And for me, it's just Gabe CC. In general, you can always DM me on Twitter.
Nice.
If anyone has any question or wants to do anything, feel free to just DM me on Twitter.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Cheers.